for the world, because it's going to have impacts not only here but around the world. We're seeing businesses in our state, they're not investing right now. They're holding off. And they were starting to invest, which is very, very unfortunate. So we're playing with fire, and we should not be doing that. We should be working to build the economy, not to try to contract it.
I think all of us down here, I think, agree that we have hope that an arrangement and a deal would be made. We want to reopen the government, pay our bills, not get in default, and recognize that we still have more work to do, because we do need to bring the deficit down. We need to bring it down and ensure that at the end of the day we're paying off our debt long term. But we got to get through this process. We can't just keep doing these short-term stop and goes, but I think we're all down here to make sure that that happens. So from my perspective, I'm not happy that I'm here on Sunday, but I'm glad I'm here on Sunday, trying to solve and work with folks to solve this problem. I'd rather be back home with Alaskans talking about the needs they have and trying to figure out what we do in the long term on education, on making sure we continue to move our oil and gas development, our mining, our timber, which I know both of our states have a lot of interest in. But we're here now, and we got to resolve these issues. And they're going to be tough, and they're going to have to be a little give and take and find that common ground. But at the end of the day, I believe we can get there. But we can't get there if people are hardened into their views and try to reclaim that we haven't done enough already. We have done $70 billion worth of cuts already on an annualized basis for this next year. So I thank my colleagues for coming down here, spending their time on a Sunday talking about an important issue. Hopefully the next time we're down here, we're talking about a great resolution that moves this country forward and keeps our economy going. To my friend from Oregon.
Well, thank you. I appreciate my colleague from Alaska helping to organize this conversation. And I must say, I think if you get 10 common-sense people in a room, they would say, do that short-term continuing resolution. The Democrats have agreed to the Republican number. It's a win for the Republicans. The Democrats are asking for a negotiation. That's a win for our country. And we're asking for the default strategy to be set aside completely, because it's completely contrary to any responsible organization to use a strategy of not paying your bills. And on that foundation, we could get back to the normal process of considering the legislation we should be considering, of considering how we restore the regular budget and appropriation process. I know that would be very welcome across this nation. This Senate has to be able to get a budget process that isn't cut off right out of the blocks, if you will, as it has been this year. It was 6 months ago that we passed the budget and we tried to start a budget conference committee, and colleagues filibustered, a small group of colleagues filibustered starting the budget conference committee. Somehow we have to have a process where we can get into a conference room and have that conversation and not have a small group just basically sabotage the entire budget and appropriation process that's so important for our nation.
I agree, and I think the last thing I'll say for this afternoon, and I'll say as an appropriator, that is what we should do. Get past this stop and go, sit down, go the long term, get the budget resolved, not spend over 20 different times trying to get people to the table. It's all we're trying to do. Get a budget resolved, then get on with the appropriation bill so people know over an annualized basis what their budgets will be. I totally agree. Hopefully the next 24, 48 hours we'll get down that road and get this short-term stuff out of the way and then get on with the longer term. Again, I want to thank the President for the time and allowing us to speak today.
Madam President.
The senator from Missouri is recognized.
Madam President, I want to thank my colleagues for, in I think, very vivid way, they laid out the severe damage that is occurring because of the shutdown and the potential idea that one of the most important economic powers, if not the most important economic power in the world, is fooling around with the notion that we wouldn't pay our bills on time. I want to compliment also the various newspapers around the country that are doing their best to point out to people that this isn't some kind of exercise that's just about all of us here in Washington. This isn't about the politics or the posturing. This is about real people and the pain that they are feeling. This morning in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, The headline was, "Shutdown is casting a wide net of grief." And in that article, it went through a number of different people's lives and how they were hurting because of this shutdown, like Nancy Jones, who retired from the Army 4 months ago, and she was at a food pantry this weekend because her retirement check had not processed through yet, and now it's not clear when she's going to get her retirement check. She moved back to St. Louis to help with her 4 grandchildren, and now she is putting her head on her pillow tonight not knowing when her pension that she has earned will actually come through because of the shutdown, and going to a food pantry at a local church to get 2 bags of groceries. And then there's Rashida Whitfield. She went to the Social Security office in St. Louis to do something very simple, and that was to replace her lost Social Security card. Well, she knocked and no one was home. The Social Security Administration has furloughed people that do things like getting you a replacement for your lost Social Security card. Now, why is that so important? Well, because Ms. Whitfield needs her Social Security card in order to fill out her Section 8 application. And time is running short for her to find housing for herself and her small child. She's unsure what she's going to do if she can't get that replacement card. And then there's the people who have been furloughed that clean one of the federal office buildings in St. Louis. They work for $11 an hour, cleaning the Goodfellow Federal Center in North St. Louis. $11 an hour jobs. These people aren't sitting on a big cushion. These people are trying to figure out now, without that $11 an hour job, if they can either pay the rent or make the car payment, but probably not both. And then there's Jill Ketchum, who works and is fortunate that her child, her 5-year-old daughter, goes to the Head Start school. She's not sure what she's going to do because she's been told by the Grace Hill Settlement House that that Head Start program cannot last through the month if the shutdown continues. And that mother who is working and uses that important Head Start program to make it work for her family will have no place to take her daughter. What does she do? Does she have to quit her job? And what about all the other mothers, single mothers out there with young children that have the rug pulled out from under them because Head Start can no longer operate? Jill and Rashida and Nancy, they don't deserve this. They're playing by the rules. They're doing everything they should be doing in this great country. They're not asking us to do them a favor. They're just asking us to do our jobs. Now, here's what I am so frustrated about. This pain that is being inflicted on millions of Americans, and this pain grows every day. Somebody likened it the other day to when the power goes out at your home. In the first couple of hours, you're getting candles out and you're getting out the board games, and you think, oh, this, is kind of fun. And I had the feeling around here the first couple of hours that people didn't understand the gravity of what this meant to so many people throughout this country. So many people in my state. But after the electricity's been off a few hours, all of a sudden it's not fun anymore. You start to lose the food in the refrigerator, and you wonder how you're going to replace it. You wonder about what happens with your job. You wonder about keeping warm. And that's what we're getting to now. We're getting to the point that these families across America, they cannot believe that this is ongoing day after day. Now, here's the weird part. What are we doing? Now it's not even clear to me what the other side wants. It started out with a goal that was not only irrational but unreasonable. That somehow the election last November didn't matter? That somehow a faction of one party in one house, in one branch of this great government could say, if you don't give us our way, we're going to turn out the lights, we're going to cut the power? So it was about blowing up Obamacare. Well, now it's not about that anymore. I listened with interest this morning as the Republicans in the House of Representatives spoke about what this is about. And it's not clear to me at this point what it's about. What is it that is the problem? Because it's not Obamacare anymore. Well, is it entitlement reform? Is it a grand bargain? Speaker Boehner walked away from one of those not too long ago. Is it about how much we're spending? We've been asking for a conference on our budget for years. We were getting political criticism over the fact that the Senate had not passed a budget. So we stayed up all night, took dozens and dozens and dozens of votes and passed a budget. And then did what we do in this government. We asked to go to conference. For month after month after month, the junior senator from Texas and others blocked our ability to go to conference and talk about the budget. So I don't even understand at this moment what this is about. It's not about Obamacare anymore. Is it about reforming Medicare and Social Security? That's not clear. Is it about how much money we're spending? That's not even clear. It feels like we're boxing shadows. I really am hopeful that my colleagues across the aisle in the Senate, many of whom I have worked with on many different things, a lot of whom I've worked with bringing down spending. My colleague from Alaska spoke. We have cut our deficit in half this year. It is a good thing we're spending less money. And most of us here think we should continue in a thoughtful way to spend less money. It is my hope that my colleagues that rejected, the majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle rejected the junior senator from Texas's effort to say us too to the goal that was irrational and unreasonable of shutting down Obamacare. Those senators that knew this was not a game that should be played, I'm hopeful that they will help us reach a resolution on this that will not only allow the government to reopen, that we'll quit playing the very dangerous game of saying to the rest of the world that we're not the United States of America anymore. We are not the grandest and most glorious democracy ever created. We are dysfunctional deadbeats. Because if it gets to be Thursday and we have not gotten this wrapped up, the rest of the country is going to see this democracy as dysfunctional, the democracy that so many other countries have tried to copy and emulate because we've always managed to work it out. To me, that is the saddest part of this whole thing, is that we're actually playing around with the essence of what makes our country great, and that is our democracy, our ability to compromise, our ability to negotiate, our ability to not throw tantrums and say we either get our way or we shut the place down. And the phoniest argument that's being made of all, the most disingenuous misdirection problem that I've got is this notion that somehow this is all about if we would just stop the congressional exemption under Obamacare. Members of Congress and their staffs are the only people in America that are required to shop on the exchange. Let me say it again. Members of Congress and their staffs are the only people in America that are required to shop on the exchange. The only issue here is whether or not we get an employer contribution. That's the only issue. Now, every Republican in my state that works for the state government gets an employer contribution. Every Republican that serves Congress from my state gets an employer contribution. They do it right now. They get that employer contribution. If it is so immoral, if it is so bad to get an employer contribution, give it up. Step up. Set the example. Set the example. Say no more employer contribution, it is evil. And until you step up and give up your employer contribution, I think it is beyond offensive that you would threaten the young lady that answers my phone her employer contribution. The young man just out of school with a heavy debt load who thought he was going to get an employer contribution when he came to work for the Senate, who lives in Columbia, Missouri, doesn't make a huge amount of money. You don't come to work for the government if you want to get rich. You come to work for the government if you want to serve. The notion that for political purposes we are threatening the employer contribution of the people that work in our offices is frankly about as low as it gets. So, and I don't want to hear it anymore unless somebody has given up their employer contribution. They all can. And the minute I hear that the Republicans that are advocating this position have given up their employer contribution right now, then we can have a discussion that has misled the American people into thinking somehow this is some special deal for Congress. Real people are getting hurt. We're not even sure what the other side wants. We're threatening the essence of what makes America great, which is our democracy. And we're misleading the American people in ways that are tremendously unfair to the great people who work for all of us across this city and, importantly, across all of our home states. So I will continue to talk to my friends across the aisle, and even today on Sunday, all of us are having these conversations. I think it's my understanding that our friends down the hall in the House of Representatives went home. We're having conversations. A week ago, I don't think the Speaker could utter a sentence without saying the word conversation. We're having conversations today. I hope they will continue into the night and that tomorrow will be a better day for this democracy that we all like to brag about, but we're threatening to blow up. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander. And taking the first quorum call of the day here on the Senate floor, the senators gavelled in about 3.5 hours ago. They came in at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And just doing speeches, talking more about the shutdown and the debt ceiling. Majority Leader Harry Reid, he was the first to take the floor earlier today, bringing up the debt ceiling bill. And a little bit of information about that from Politico that reports that Senate leaders remain stuck over federal funding levels and the length of an increase in the national borrowing limit, still struggling to cut a deal to reopen the government and avert a shutdown, which the U.S. Treasury says would happen as early as Thursday. We're going to take a look now more on the negotiations that have been happening or not happening on Capitol Hill and the White House. This is from this morning's Washington Journal.
Well, we are joined on the phone by Caitlin Huey-Burns, who covers Capitol Hill for RealClearPolitics.com. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
The Senate coming in for a rare Sunday session. Why was that necessary? What happened yesterday to necessitate a Sunday session today?
Well, we are getting closer, of course, to the October 17th deadline to raise the debt ceiling, and we're without a deal. Things really fell apart over the weekend with the House negotiations. We remember the House was sounding fairly optimistic heading into the weekend, having with congressional leaders having met with the president and agreeing to work out some kind of talks and going into negotiations, and that was unable to happen. The White House was not supportive of what Republicans wanted to do on the debt ceiling, and House Republicans had trouble getting their caucus together around a plan as well. So the goals and the focus has really shifted over to the Senate.
Well, how does this all play with members of the House, particularly the leadership of the Republican Party and the conservative wing, the more conservative wing of the Republican Party? They're sort of being left out of the discussion here.
Right, and that divide has really kind of been a big part of the narrative and the troubles between the House and the White House when we've had these fiscal talks. But there are still a lot of conservatives in the House who want to have a discussion and the fight on the health care law, want some concessions from Democrats, and I think had thought by this point they would give in to some of their demands, and that hasn't occurred. Meanwhile, Congressional House Republican leaders do want to get something done. They don't want to default, and they've been cautioning their members against that plan, or against that crisis, and they have just been unable to come up with a deal. So now it's on the Senate's shoulders. And even if the Senate does come up with a plan, it's a big question whether Speaker John Boehner would bring that bill up to the floor. We saw the similar kind of situation with the fiscal cliff deal that was made in the Senate and went to the House, and Boehner brought it up with the help of Democrats.
As the Senate comes in today and you continue to cover this story, what sort of things are you looking for? Who in particular will you be following on this Sunday?
Well, it will be very interesting to look at how Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, the two Senate leaders from the Democratic and Republican Party, work together. Also, who they bring into these meetings. Lamar Alexander and Chuck Schumer are close allies of their respective leaders, but it will be interesting to see if they can work together on something like this. We saw a plan introduced by Susan Collins over the weekend failed. We'll see if she also participates as well. So I would keep an eye on the two majority and minority leaders.
Caitlin Huey-Burns writes for RealClearPolitics.com, and you can read her reporting there and follow her on Twitter. Thanks for the update.
Thank you very much for having me.
And a little bit more about Senator Collins' proposal. Senate Democratic leaders rejected that proposal yesterday. As reported by Politico, the burden to find a solution remains in the Senate's court, not the House. And with any talks between the two leaders, Majority Leader Harry Reid, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senator Reid, however, he was asked if he was confident he could reach a deal with Senator McConnell. He told Politico, "No, I'm just doing my best. I'm not confident in anything in the way Republicans have acted." And a little bit more on that proposal from Senator Collins. It would fund the government at an annual rate of $986 billion for 6 months, extending the debt limit until January, the end of January next year, and do a delay in the medical device tax for 2 years. That's something that Democrats would probably also be amenable to as well. Again, just waiting for senators to take the floor again as they're here for a rare Sunday session.
The majority leader is recognized.
Call be terminated.
Without objection, so ordered.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to period morning business. Senators be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection, so ordered.
I've been told that H.J. Res. 76 is due for a second reading.
The leader is correct. And the clerk will read the title of the bill in the joint resolution. Second time.
House Joint Resolution 76, making continuing appropriations for the National Nuclear Security Administration for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
Madam President, I would object, though, to any further proceedings to this matter at this time.
Objection having been heard, the bill will be placed on the calendar.
Madam President, I've had a productive conversation with the Republican leader this afternoon. Our discussions were substantive, and we'll continue those discussions. I'm optimistic about the prospects for a positive conclusion to the issues before this country today. Okay. I now ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business day, adjourn until 2 p.m. Monday, October 14th. Following the prayer and the pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired. Adjournment proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. And at 5 p.m., the Senate proceed to a vote on the Wood and Haikala district judge nominations.
Without objection, so ordered.
Then under the previous order at 5 p.m., tomorrow there will be 30 minutes for debate prior to a series of 2 roll call votes on confirmation nominations for Andrea Wood to be United States District Judge for the Northern District of Illinois and Madeline Haikala for the Northern District of Alabama. There's no further business to come before the Senate. I ask that adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.
And no legislative business today on the floor of the Senate. They've spent much of the day coming to the floor to